The biting Arctic wind whipped around the small ice and snow dwelling, a constant reminder of Alaska's unforgiving nature in the mid-19th century. Anuk, an Inuit woman with striking features and eyes that had seen too much, felt the cold deep in her bones, but it was the chill of loneliness that consumed her most. Her husband, a strong and gentle hunter, had been taken by a sudden blizzard 3 moons ago. The community's whispers, once supportive, now mingled with distrust. A widow without children, without a man to provide for the household, was a burden in such harsh times, a mouth to feed with no direct contribution to the hunt. Anuk spent her days mending pelts, her fingers nimble, but her mind far away, reliving memories of lost love and an uncertain future. The nights were even longer, filled only by the distant howl of wolves and the echo of her own profound silence. Hunger was a constant companion, gnawing at her insides, but the true pain was the absence of her beloved husband, the void he left behind. The snow fell incessantly, covering the world in a pristine yet desolate white blanket, and each silent flake seemed to carry away the dwindling hope she desperately clung to. She clutched her few precious possessions, a bone amulet intricately carved by her husband's hands, a symbol of their bond, and an old, flickering whale oil lamp that barely illuminated the suffocating darkness of her tiny dwelling. The future seemed as nebulous and uncertain as the horizon perpetually covered by the Arctic mist, a bleak and featureless expanse. Spring, with its distant promise of deglaciation and renewed abundance, felt like a cruel, mocking mirage, a dream too far to ever reach. If you were moved by Anuk's journey and the children's courage, please consider subscribing to our channel for more stories of resilience and human connection. It was just before the first hint of dawn, when a profound penumbra still reigned supreme over the vast, frozen tundra. The world outside Anuk's small, quiet dwelling was a canvas of deep blues and purples, the stars beginning to fade into the encroaching light, their brilliance diminished by the faint glow of the approaching sun. The silence was absolute. A heavy, unyielding blanket broken only by the distant familiar creak of shifting ice and the soft sigh of the wind. Then, unexpectedly, the unmistakable sound echoed with startling clarity through her dwelling. Tock, tock, tock. Anuk, who had finally drifted into a fitful, shallow sleep with the dim whale oil lamp still burning low, shot upright in her furs, her heart hammering wildly against her ribs. It was a frantic drum in the silence, its rhythm mirroring the sudden jolt of adrenaline. Who could possibly be knocking at this ungodly hour? No one, absolutely no one, ever visited so early. Not even the most desperate hunters, especially on such a frigid, desolate morning when the cold bit deep enough to steal one's breath. A primal sense of fear, an emotion she had learned to meticulously control and suppress in her harsh, unforgiving life, began to seep insidiously into her very core, a cold dread colder than the air. She slowly, cautiously, approached the entrance of her dwelling, her breath caught rigidly in her throat, every muscle tense and ready for flight or defense. The insistent knocking repeated, more urgent and desperate now, a series of quick, sharp raps that sent a shiver down her spine. Anuk took a deep, fortifying breath, the icy air burning her lungs, summoning every ounce of courage she had left within her. With a slow, deliberate movement, her hand trembling slightly, she carefully pulled aside the heavy animal hide that served as her only door, revealing the bleak expanse beyond. What she witnessed outside, framed against the stark white canvas of the frozen landscape and the fading twilight, made the very air freeze in her lungs. A sight so utterly unexpected, so out of place, it stole her breath away completely. Standing directly before her, starkly outlined against the vast, unforgiving white expanse of the relentless snow, were 3 small figures. They seemed impossibly fragile against the monumental backdrop of the Alaskan wilderness. A boy, clearly the eldest, and two younger girls, their forms barely reaching her waist. Their small, delicate faces were severely marked by the bitter, raw cold. Their cheeks and noses were red and chapped, and their eyes held the unmistakable hollow look of undeniable hunger. Their clothes were nothing more than tattered, threadbare rags, worn thin, and offering scant protection against the brutal elements, certainly not enough to survive an Arctic night. The oldest, a boy of perhaps 8 years, held a well-worn, tattered Bible firmly clutched in his small, gloved hands, its leather cover cracked and its pages likely frozen stiff, a stark symbol of a world far removed from Anuk's own. His eyes, a startlingly clear blue that seemed almost translucent against his pale, chapped face, gazed up at her with a profound mixture of both apprehension and desperate hope, wide and searching, begging for something she couldn't yet name. Beside him, the two younger girls, their faces pinched with cold and fear, instinctively huddled closer together for warmth and comfort, their tiny noses reddened and their lips painfully cracked from exposure to the wind. Anuk blinked once, then twice, trying desperately to process the surreal, impossible image before her, her mind struggling to reconcile what she saw with what she knew of her solitary world. Where had these fragile children come from? How by some miracle beyond comprehension had they possibly survived an entire Arctic night exposed to such brutal, life-ending conditions? The boy's voice, small and weak from exhaustion and dehydration, yet surprisingly clear and trembling, finally broke the profound frozen silence. Are you Mama?" The question hung in the frigid air, a delicate, almost ethereal thread of hope suspended in a world of overwhelming despair, seeking an answer that Anuk herself didn't know if she could give. The boy's fragile question, "Are you Mama?" resonated deeply within the confines of the small dwelling, mingling eerily with the relentless howl of the wind just outside. Anuk felt a sharp, unexpected pang in her heart, a sudden ache she hadn't anticipated. Mama, she, who had long ago resigned herself to a life without children, who had buried the quiet dream of motherhood with her husband, was now confronted with 3 lost, shivering souls who, in their innocence and desperation, were asking if she was their mother. Her initial, overwhelming impulse was to immediately refuse, to explain with a practical clarity that there had been a profound mistake, that she was merely Anuk, a solitary, grief-stricken widow with nothing to offer. But as her gaze fell upon their small, famished faces and the raw, unadulterated vulnerability mirrored in their wide, pleading eyes, something deep within her fractured. The compassion she had suppressed, smothered by her own overwhelming pain and solitude, began to forcefully emerge, pushing past her defenses. The children were visibly trembling uncontrollably, their small bodies exhausted and teetering on the brink of collapse. She simply could not, in good conscience, turn her back on them. She knew, with chilling certainty, that hunger and the brutal Arctic cold were unforgiving, deadly enemies, and these children were precariously close to succumbing. She was acutely aware that sheltering them would inevitably mean more mouths to feed, more insurmountable risks, and an even greater unsustainable strain on her already meager, dwindling resources. Yet the persistent image of their desperate, pleading eyes, particularly the young boy clutching the worn Bible as if it were his only lifeline, stirred a deep-seated, undeniable instinct to protect, an ancient call to nurture. The silence stretched, heavy and profound, broken only by the children's involuntary shivers and the faint, mournful cries of distant gulls. A decision, unbidden and almost involuntary, began to solidify within her. If you've been touched by this tale of survival and unexpected family, please hit that subscribe button. Your support helps us share more powerful stories. With a new, unexpected resolve, Anuk gently but firmly ushered the 3 shivering children inside her small dwelling. The meager warmth of the structure, though barely more than a whisper against the brutal cold outside, was a stark, welcome contrast to the unforgiving environment from which they had just escaped. She moved swiftly, carefully stoking the dying embers of her fire, adding precious pieces of driftwood she had meticulously gathered, watching as the flames flickered to life, casting dancing, comforting shadows on their small, exhausted faces. The children, still wide-eyed and wary, huddled instinctively together, their gazes fixed intently on Anuk, searching for reassurance. Anuk, without hesitation, offered them what little she possessed: dried fish, carefully portioned, and melted snow, gently heated until it was warm enough to drink. They ate ravenously, their small, trembling hands barely able to hold the food as they brought it to their chapped lips, devouring every last morsel. As they slowly began to eat, Anuk gently, her voice soft and reassuring, asked them about their perilous journey, about their family, piecing together their story. The oldest boy, whose name was Caleb, spoke softly, his voice raspy from the cold and exhaustion. Their parents, he explained, had been missionaries, courageous souls traveling inland to reach new remote settlements. A sudden, fierce blizzard, far more intense than any they had ever encountered, had tragically separated them from their group. They had wandered for what felt like an eternity, lost and desperate in the endless white expanse, before, by some miraculous twist of fate, stumbling upon Anuk's isolated dwelling. The Bible, he whispered, was their mother's, a cherished possession, a constant source of comfort, guidance, and unwavering faith. News of Anuk's unexpected guests spread with surprising speed through the small, tightly knit Inuit settlement, carried on the frigid winds and hushed whispers. Curiosity quickly mingled with a growing suspicion. 3 white children, seemingly dropped from the vast, indifferent sky, now housed in the home of a lone, childless widow. It was an unprecedented event, disrupting the delicate balance of their existence. Old Man Kaito, the venerable village elder, a man whose wisdom was as deep as the ancient ice, paid Anuk a visit, his sharp, knowing eyes scrutinizing her every movement. He questioned her extensively about the children's mysterious origins, their fragile health, and most importantly, Anuk's sudden, perplexing intentions. Anuk, with quiet dignity, patiently recounted their harrowing story, the desperate plea she had witnessed in Caleb's blue eyes, and her deeply ingrained inability to turn them away. Yato, a man steeped in generations of tradition and the harsh realities of their demanding environment, understood the immense challenges of survival. But he also gravely understood the critical importance of their limited community resources. He warned Anuk of the profound burden she was taking on, the severe judgment she might inevitably face from a wary community. "These children are not of our ways, Anuk," he stated, his voice a low, grave rumble. "They will be a test, a significant challenge to our already strained existence." Anuk, however, felt a newfound quiet resolve blooming within her. The children, despite their profound cultural differences and the obvious difficulties they presented, had unexpectedly ignited a long-dormant spark within her, a profound sense of purpose she hadn't felt since the devastating passing of her beloved husband. She looked at the peacefully sleeping forms of Caleb, Sarah, and little Emily, their innocent faces serene in the dim, flickering light. She made a silent, unbreakable vow. She would protect them, whatever the immense cost, against all odds. Days slowly melted into weeks, and weeks gradually softened into a reluctant, tenuous acceptance within the community. Anuk, with infinite patience, began to teach the children essential survival skills, knowledge vital for navigating their harsh environment, how to meticulously mend furs for warmth, how to identify edible plants and berries when the thick snow finally receded in the fleeting spring, and perhaps most importantly, the profound necessity of respect for the land and its unpredictable spirit. Caleb, in turn, with a quiet solemnity, shared stories from his worn Bible, tales of enduring hope, unwavering faith, and remarkable resilience that surprisingly resonated even with Anuk, whose own beliefs were deeply rooted in the ancient spirits of the land and her ancestors. Sarah and Emily, initially shy and withdrawn, slowly found profound comfort in Anuk's quiet, steady presence and her gentle, reassuring touch. The formidable language barrier, a seemingly impenetrable wall, was slowly but surely overcome through simple gestures, shared moments of genuine laughter, and a growing unspoken understanding that transcended mere words. Anuk found herself smiling more frequently, her days now filled with the welcome, vibrant sounds of children's voices, a joyful cacophony that replaced the oppressive silence that had plagued her since her husband's death. Yet, challenges stubbornly remained. Food was perpetually scarce, a constant source of worry, and the children's unfamiliarity with the brutal Arctic environment demanded constant, vigilant supervision. They faced the persistent skepticism of some villagers, particularly those who harbored deep-seated fears of the intrusion of outsiders and the added strain on their already limited, precious resources. Anuk found herself repeatedly defending her decision, sometimes with quiet, unwavering defiance, at other times with a poignant appeal to their shared humanity, to the inherent goodness she believed lay within them. The children, too, faced their own profound struggles, deeply missing their absent parents and painstakingly adapting to a world so drastically different from the one they had known. Did this story resonate with you? Don't miss out on future narratives. Subscribe to our channel and join our community. As winter's relentless grip tightened its icy hold, the scarcity of food transformed from a chronic worry into a critical, undeniable crisis that permeated every dwelling. The stored caches of dried fish and seal meat dwindled at an alarming rate, faster than anyone had anticipated. The village council, led by the perpetually skeptical and pragmatic elder Anuk, convened a tense, urgent meeting in the central communal igloo to address the looming threat of famine and specifically discuss the burden of Anuk's adopted children. Anuk, his voice firm and unyielding, echoing with the weight of generations of survival, argued vehemently that the continued presence of these three young outsiders jeopardized the very survival of the entire community. He emphasized that with game becoming increasingly scarce, and this particular winter proving exceptionally harsh, every mouth counted, every resource was precious. He proposed, with chilling practicality and a stark absence of sentimentality, that the children be taken to the nearest trading post. This was not a kind offer, but a desperate measure, a perilous journey across miles of treacherous, snow-bound terrain that many doubted even seasoned hunters would survive, let alone three small, vulnerable children. Anuk, however, stood her ground, her voice unwavering despite the tremor in her heart, a testament to her newfound resolve. She passionately defended her decision, appealing to their deepest, most ancient values. She reminded them of the sacred Inuit tradition of hospitality, a bedrock principle that transcended immediate hardship, and the solemn, inherent duty to protect the innocent and the vulnerable, especially those who sought refuge. Caleb, witnessing the heated, tense discussion and understanding the gravity of their situation, bravely stepped forward. His small voice, surprisingly clear and strong despite his fear and hunger, cut through the murmuring. He humbly offered to help, to hunt alongside the men, to share their small, dwindling rations, anything to alleviate the perceived burden. His unexpected courage, coupled with Anuk's fervent, heartfelt plea, swayed some of the villagers, their faces softening with empathy, but conspicuously not all. Nook remained stubbornly unconvinced, his eyes cold and unforgiving, fixed on a grim, unsentimental future where only the strongest would endure. The community was starkly divided, a palpable rift forming between those who believed in the profound power of compassion and communal support, and those who prioritized brutal self-preservation above all else, clinging to the cold, hard logic of survival at any cost. The tension in the frigid air was palpable, a chilling threat as tangible and real as the biting wind itself, threatening to splinter their tight-knit world. Just as the community's division reached its peak, a ferocious blizzard, more intense and unforgiving than any in recent memory, descended upon the village with terrifying swiftness and a deafening roar. It raged relentlessly for days, a blinding, howling fury that trapped everyone indoors, sealing them within their dwellings and making any form of hunting utterly impossible. Visibility dropped to mere feet, the world outside a maelstrom of white. Food supplies dwindled at an alarming pace, the last reserves quickly vanishing, and the heart-wrenching cries of hungry children echoed mournfully through the confined, drafty dwellings, a constant, agonizing reminder of their dire situation. Anuk knew with a sinking certainty that pressed down on her chest that they could not afford to wait for the storm to break. To do so would be a death sentence. With a heavy heart, her face grim with resolute determination, she meticulously prepared her hunting gear, sharpening her tools and checking her traps, despite the raging, blinding storm outside. Caleb, observing her grim, unyielding resolve and understanding the desperate necessity, unexpectedly begged to come with her, his young face earnest and full of a courage that belied his years. His youthful spirit and a surprisingly astute knowledge of animal tracks, gleaned from his late father's teachings and their journey, might prove invaluable in such conditions. Against her better judgment, the instinct to protect overwhelming her, but seeing the desperate, unwavering resolve in his eyes that mirrored her own, Anuk reluctantly agreed, taking the boy and leaving the two younger girls safely with a trusted elder, a woman known for her kindness and strength. They set out into the blinding, swirling snow, the wind tearing mercilessly at their exposed faces, each gust like a physical blow, numbing them to the bone. The hunt was an arduous, perilous ordeal, a brutal test of endurance. They tirelessly tracked a lone caribou for what felt like endless hours, battling the relentless elements, their bodies pushed beyond their known limits of endurance, muscles aching, lungs burning. Just as hope began to painfully fade, replaced by a creeping despair, they managed to corner the elusive animal in a small, wind-sheltered hollow. Anuk, with practiced precision, honed by years of survival, made the kill, a swift and clean strike born of desperation and absolute necessity. But as they prepared to haul the precious meat back to the starving village, a sudden, ominous groan emanated from the ice beneath them, a chilling, guttural sound that vibrated through the frozen ground. A thin, hairline crack suddenly appeared, spiderwebbing across the surface, widening with terrifying rapidity. They were on thin ice, literally, their lives hanging precariously in the balance, a treacherous sheet separating them from the icy abyss below. With the vital caribou meat finally secured, Anuk and Caleb raced against time, every second precious, the cracking, groaning ice beneath their feet, a terrifying, visceral reminder of their incredibly precarious situation. They scrambled desperately onto solid ground, their lungs burning, muscles screaming, just as the fragile ice gave way with a deafening crack, swallowing the snow and leaving a gaping black chasm in its wake, a hungry maw in the frozen landscape. Exhausted but triumphant, their faces etched with the strain of their ordeal and streaked with dirt and ice, they returned to the village, the large caribou slung between them, a powerful beacon of hope and a tangible symbol of their unwavering resilience. The sight of the fresh meat brought a collective sigh of profound relief and immense gratitude from the villagers, a wave of palpable emotion washing over the hungry faces. Even Nook, the perpetually skeptical elder who had argued so fiercely against the children, looked at Anuk with a newfound grudging respect, his stern features softened by the undeniable proof of her courage, resourcefulness, and the life-saving bounty she had secured. The children, overjoyed and relieved at seeing Caleb and the meat, rushed forward to embrace Anuk and Caleb, their small bodies clinging tightly to their saviors, their silent thanks more eloquent than words. The furious blizzard eventually subsided, its destructive rage finally spent, its last icy breath exhaled, and with its passing, the long, harsh winter began to show unmistakable signs of yielding its icy grip. The days gradually grew longer, each one bringing a subtle but welcome change, the sun's rays a little warmer, gently melting the stubborn edges of the snow. The ice on the rivers began to break apart, a triumphant symphony of cracking and flowing water, a chorus of life returning, signaling the joyful, long-awaited arrival of spring and the promise of abundant game, of an end to the lean times. Anuk, once a solitary, grief-stricken figure consumed by her loss, now had a new family, bound not by blood but by shared struggle and mutual love. She possessed a renewed sense of purpose, guiding these young lives, and perhaps most importantly, the hard-earned, undeniable respect of her entire community. Caleb, Sarah, and Emily, though forever carrying the indelible memories of their traumatic past and the parents they lost, had found a new home, a safe harbor, and a loving, protective mama in the resilient heart of the Arctic. Anuk looked out at the vast, thawing landscape, a profound sense of peace washing over her, a quiet warmth spreading through her chest, dispelling the lingering cold. The endless, brutal winter had finally given way to the vibrant promise of spring, not just in the land awakening around them, but deeply within her own transformed life, now filled with the boundless warmth of love, connection, and a rekindled hope that promised a brighter future.